Hey everybody, I'm back. A little bit of a hiatus, but we have returned to do the, I don't know, fourth annual perhaps, off-season mailbag wherein a bunch of people ask me questions. I go dig around in statistics and trends like a little truffle pig and try and unearth some interesting answers for you guys. So let's get into it. There was tons of good questions in this, and this is the return of more, I guess, frequent and regular podcasting from myself. We're ramping up for the season. Subscribe, like the video, all that kind of good stuff. So actually, I think a really good question is from Shosh __ NK asks, what is the one skill that vaults Scottie into the all NBA conversation? And I think this is a really, really easy one. Health. And perhaps the skill of playing on a good team. When you look at what he was able to do last year as far as defensive impact, especially in that new role. The shooting jump that didn't last all season, but obviously there was a huge difference between one season and the next, especially as it pertains to volume and diversity of shots. And there was a huge response to him from defenses around the league. And just the finishing that we've seen is excellent from him. He's extremely high level playmaking. This is a guy who, as far as like the numbers, vaulted himself into that conversation, I think, quite easily. It's just he needs to play on a good team because all NBA rarely ever goes to, a player outside of the playoffs. I don't know how often that happens, but it's not exactly common. What I would like to see him, so basically, like if the Raptors are good, and part of that would be him jumping a little bit past all NBA, perhaps carrying a team that isn't supposed to be elite, but also Jakob Pertl's health, finding a foothold as a defense and finding lineups that work, being able to maximize players off of the bench like Kelly Olynyk. You can hide some of his defensive, let's say inefficiencies or deficiencies, I should say. Davion Mitchell, you can hide some of his offensive deficiencies. Both of these guys help lower or help bring up the level of the offense and defense respectively. Making things work elsewhere is a big thing. But Scottie, I think the ability to get to the free throw line, the ability to take the middle pick and roll and just be able to, mine that for tons and tons of points over the course of the season, because I think teams had trouble guarding that last year, was a huge step he took. Taking the things that he did well and making them great. And I think more play types like pick and roll to put him in and to constantly surround him with shooting to make sure that he shines in that aspect and make sure he has room to turn the corner, to get downhill, and make sure that defenses freak out, throw bodies at him, and let his genius playmaking kind of unfold. No matter what the floor looks like, he'll usually find the best pass. So a lot of things converge, but he's pretty close to all NBA level already. And there's a reason he was an all-star, even though the Raptors were a bad team. He's very impressive. This one from George Nelson. If Agbaji doesn't show signs of improvement early in the season, do you think the Raptors should cut their losses and focus on developing other players? I don't think that's such a bad idea. Now, Agbaji, I think, is probably closer to NBA impact than a score of guys that the Raptors have at the end of their bench. Like, he's probably closer than Jacoby Walter is. He's probably closer than Shamshay. He's closer than Mobo. He's probably closer than quite a few players. But the 3-point shot has to come around. He can make the team happy defensively. You can throw him onto first options. He can kind of corral, really good guards. He can stick with them. He can play within scheme. He can, as I said, corral them to less harmful places on the court. That's all very important. And he can guard ones and twos pretty well and smaller threes. That all has its utility, but he's just been such a negative offensively. He can't finish in the short mid-range. I think, 1 for 22 in the short mid-range as far like push shots and stuff like that. It was abhorrent. He was bad at the rim. He was like, he shot 22% from 3. This kind of stuff, it shatters how defenses perceive you. And then in turn, shatters how your offense finds its health and your ability to move tag men and your ability to move guys around screens and create lanes for your teammates. It's really harmful. The easiest access he has is to hit shots. And that can either happen or it won't happen. But if it doesn't, if he's just a guy who isn't shooting the basketball, I think it does make sense, especially if the Raptors aren't particularly good, to just punt and make sure like, hey, we have a bunch of guys who we don't know what their NBA skill is going to be. We don't know exactly how it's going to manifest on the NBA floor. Give them minutes, see what happens out there. it wouldn't hurt. I don't think that's such a bad thing. And this, I think, a really good question from Molly Weir, quote, how much does offensive involvement correlate with touches / points per possession and assists? Are advanced stats great in determining how good a player is, end quote. So this is really good. I think the Raptors were a really interesting case study or inflection point for how touches kind of correlate with involvement in offense. As we saw, RJ Barrett had these big numbers as a Raptor, despite having like the fifth most touches on the team. Touches don't have to correlate with what you're doing. Like Fred VanVleet had, roughly the same amount of touches as Dennis Schroeder did to start both the 2022 and 23 season and the 2023 and 24 season for the Raptors. And there was a large difference in how they scored the basketball. There was a large difference in how they play made. More drive and kick from Fred VanVleet, more, making passes from up top from Dennis Schroeder. He was letting the framework of the offense do a little bit more work for him. And Scottie, we saw eventually vault himself into very high touches. I think it's very easy to see the correlation between touches with Scottie because he's not a cog. He's almost the whole damn machine, right? It's a lot more nuanced than just seeing touches and seeing how that happens. Pascal's touches also went way down, but he managed to score way more points per touch. He managed to be put in way more advantageous situations. And so his numbers didn't dip a crazy amount. Of course, they did a little, but his touches were cut by 25 a game or something like that. It was huge. So that kind of stuff does manifest into slight differences, but I'm not sure that touches are a good indicator. Points per possession is pretty good at looking at like bang for your buck, but also then you have to go and dive deeper and see, okay, what type of positions is this guy being put in? Like Mitchell Robinson, points per possession is massive. Unless you're talking about points per possession on like the team-wide scale, in which it's a great indicator, or on a play type scale, it's a great indicator for letting you know just the wide swath of what's happening. Has this been good? Has this been bad? And then you can start and go look at what's happening. It's why when I looked at Scottie's pick and roll numbers, I came away more positive before last season than the numbers seem to convey. However, I wasn't positive enough, like not remotely, because he actually really turned around that play type and made it a strength of his after statistically, and because of the push to switch scheme that was being played against him, it was something he really struggled with in his sophomore season. And then, are advanced stats great in determining how good a player is? It depends which advanced stat. I think some of them are overly reliant on like steals. I think some of them overly weight rebounds. The most important thing is for you to understand what an advanced stat is measuring. Like player efficiency rating is completely, nobody cares about that anymore, despite it being like the flagship catch-all number for many years. I think catch-alls are cool. I try not to cite them very often because catch-alls are best if you know the numbers that go into it. If you know the formula and you can tell like, why does this catch-all rank big men so much higher than like guards? Why does this catch-all think that guards are way better than wings? Like it's typically weighted according to numbers that correlate with what each position or player type is able to garner or get during a game. So it's more important to know what goes into a catch-all. I don't think they're super useful, but it is nice to see players ranking high in catch-alls and stuff like that, but I think the game is more nuanced than that. And especially since we're getting to this place in basketball where the talent level is really quite high in the middle of the league, that we see players who could score 24 points per game one year, they could be coming off the bench for 12 points per game next year. Usage and how you're used is of great import now, more so than it ever has been. From Frog at Frogerton, quote, if you could add any player to the Raptors, who would you add? Now, I think Victor Wembanyama, uh, that might be a bit of like a cop-out. There's probably like a niche art house answer here, but I would love to see Scottie and Wembanyama play together. I think that would be hellacious on both ends of the floor. And that would put the Raptors immediately into I think they'd be the best positioned franchise in the NBA if they had both those guys. The Spurs are like, with Sohan, I love Devin Vassell for what it's worth, but with Sohan and Wembanyama, it's like having Wembanyama and like Scottie, but worse at like so many things. Although I do like Sohan, and God bless him. I hope he turns around some of the things that he's been struggling with. From Athan T at Athan T419 or Athan, I'm not sure how to say that. My apologies. Quote, how many no pass logo threes or drives does IQ take per game? Who will be the perimeter defender and starter at shooting guard? Gradey Dick, Bruce Brown, can see the Raps trying to up his trade value. Ochai Agbaji, last chance to establish himself. Or your dark horse, Davion Mitchell, albeit undersized, but can defend and help IQ. End quote. You have 3 questions here, so I'll answer the first one. How many no pass logo threes or drives does IQ take per game? I don't know the drives, but I just poked around quick on Synergy for this. I think he shot 26 of 73 on no pass like threes this season. So 35%. I think the points per possession would be like 1.08 or something on that. It's not super, super common for him. I haven't seen the drives, but I would like to see it go quite a bit higher. This is what Darko talked about to myself, to many media members, many people, his own coaching staff, players, Emmanuel himself over the course of the season and in the offseason as well. He wants to see Emmanuel, who is one of the best shooters in the world. You can quibble whether he gets in the top 10 for you or whether he's farther down. It doesn't really matter, but he is one of the best. Seeing him put up a lot of threes, especially since he can't shoot them off the dribble. Now, there are finer details that do, his slower pickup point. He has a slower load into shooting the basketball. So he doesn't have that lightning quick release. Although when he's off ball, his shot prep can be really, really strong and he can get it up quicker. And he's capable shooting right or left, although he prefers the right a lot from what I've seen. And I talked to him about it too, but he was reluctant to say that he preferred one over the other. Although, I mean, it's definitely one over the other. But I would like to see more no pass logo threes, more no pass drives, because a no pass drive to me is a good thing. I think that indicates that you're creating an advantage. A no pass drive would be like you grab the rebound or the ball gets inbounded to you, you take it up the court. It's like just a 1-4 flat, let's say, or a 1-5 flat. And if it's a no pass drive and you just get in the teeth of the defense and hit a floater or a layup, that means like the first action is creating an advantage. The first action is putting you in a strong position. These are really, really great things. And as far as the who will be the perimeter defender and starter at shooting guard, if it's Gradey Dick, he'll only be one of those things. The perimeter defender will be Emmanuel Quickley. I do like they put up Davion Mitchell. I think that Davion, he's not going to start, but I am also, I think similar to you, really excited at the idea of perhaps the Raptors being able to get these combo lineups with Davion and IQ out there and winning some minutes with them. I think it's a unique 2-point guard look that they can put out there. I think that it's something that will alleviate the duties of being, the guy guarding at the point of attack on Emmanuel Quickley. And Emmanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett and guys like Jakob Poeltl, there should be enough craft, and with Darko's offense, on the floor to open up easier opportunities for Davion, who is in the second leg of his NBA journey, where he's trying to kind of get a foothold in the league, play more minutes, make sure he hits his shots, pump, drive, make good decisions against rotating defenses. He'll have an opportunity to do some of more of those role player things that he's slowly been morphing more so into. I don't know if it goes super well, but I hope it does. And I see what you're saying there. As far as Bruce or Ochai, I think it's going to be Gradey, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Bruce or Ochai, to be quite honest with you. Ochai had a really long run that I wasn't exactly sure why he got such a long look and run, but he did, and I could be confounded the exact same way, this upcoming season. Blake Murphy says, what is the turtle standing on? Obviously, this is in reference to I really like the saying turtles all the way down. And it's like a joke on an infinite loop or infinite regress. It's like, it's a turtle, the world is on a turtle's back, I believe is the origin of turtles all the way down. And turtles all the way down means that it's on a turtle's back, but that turtle is on a turtle's back. And it's a loop, and it's infinite turtles. It's turtles all the way down. It might seem a little nonsensical, but it is something, when you hear something said, it can kind of be, you'll be like, hell yeah, I like the sound of that. The cut of, when you all these terms, I like the cut of his jib. When someone says that, when Mark Jones was like, oh man, he was in his bag, there's fries at the bottom. All these turns of phrase colloquialisms, I love them. And turtles all the way down is really good. But yeah, I think it's just like an infinite regress thing. So the turtle, Blake, as I'm sure you know, is standing on another turtle, which is standing on another turtle and another turtle. From Nesta, who big shout out Nesta, always listening, always in the chat, always watching the vids and consuming my work. Thank you, Nesta. Quote: Will Scottie Barnes actually surpass my 3.5 stocks prediction this year? He got close last season, but close is not good enough for us insecure fans. Also, what does Scottie need to do to be seen as the star he is? So south of the border, too many people have forgotten him, in my opinion. Yeah, this is also, how do you suggest we as Canadians push for Scottie's naturalization before the 2028 Olympics? This is It's hard to just scale up stocks infinitely. And you and I, very very early, you put me on. You commented and you had very bold stocks predictions for Scottie, and he was close to it, way closer than anybody might have guessed. And my stocks prediction that got dunked on online because I was too optimistic about Scottie. But then obviously I was even I was not optimistic enough for him. I don't know how much more he can just like keep scaling it up. 3.5 stocks would be so much. I think if the Raptors defense was like, if he really, really, if they were super good, if they had better like guard defenders, if they had a little few more game changers in the backcourt, I think he could do it. This year, I don't think he'll be able to, but he is close, and he's a stocks monster, man. And then what does he need to do to be seen as the star that he is, south of the border? I think probably what would have helped a lot is if he had been like he had made Team USA. And honestly, I know you talked about the naturalization of 2028 to Canada, but I think what's more likely to make him a star, since the Raptors don't look like they're going to contend soon, what's more likely to make him a star is maybe the 2028 Olympics for USA, or maybe in 2026, 2027, the Raptors are a really strong team. But as far as, and kind of what I said earlier, Scottie does so much star stuff, and it doesn't have to be the number one option on a title team. You can be the second best player on the team and be a star. You can be the third best player on the team and be a star. Stars look different, and Scottie is quite unique, but just like what he provides all the time is stardom. The rest of stardom is hard to calculate for. Like Anthony Edwards has a bigger star shining than what his play would indicate. And by some degree, it's why so many people were so quick to jump the gun to be like, Anthony Edwards is like a top 5 player. He's like one of the best players in the playoffs. And it's like, probably not. And that came up short. And he's still young, and he may very well be that someday, but it's because people really like his personality, and they're already bought into that kind of stuff that they want to give him that stardom. Scottie doesn't have the same cult of personality around him, at least not in the States. I think he has it to some degree with Canadian fans, and at least in the Toronto market. I don't know how he'll engender himself to Americans for that attention. I think you got to be like a finals MVP, or you got to be a hero at the 2028 Olympics, which they'll have a lot of scoring guards. Will they have a guy like Scottie Barnes on that team? I doubt it. So he could really be that guy. He could pop off, which obviously is not good for your naturalization talk. From Mackay Bruce, my mentee, my guy, Raptors Republic's very own, quote, what is your ideal stat line for IQ, and do you think his playmaking will improve, end quote. Yeah, his playmaking will improve. He is getting to be the lead ball handler more often. We saw it improve, I think, measurably during last season when he came over from New York. I thought that his scoring wasn't as impressive, but his playmaking was pretty impressive. He started making new types of reads. He started using, I did a lot of work covering his game and the deep dives into it. The extra dribble was massive for Emmanuel Quickley in the lane, and it helped bring, defenders deeper to rotate over, to dig in on him. It created better looks for his teammates. He started seeing his roll man a little bit more often. That kind of stuff, I think, will continue to turn in the proper, it'll continue to be impressive. And honestly, if Emmanuel is like 21 and 7 on good efficiency, his rebounding, I mean, he is technically not a small guard, but he's a slight build. If he's like 21, 7, and 4 with good shooting, I'm pretty happy. I don't necessarily see a huge boom, huge, offensive season for him where he's scoring like 24 a game and he's getting up threes nonstop. Like, I hope so. That would be great. But I'm not so sure it'll happen. What I would really love to see and what I think would, age really well for this team is if Emmanuel figures out like how much he's putting into the offense, how much of his passive offense, like his off-ball stuff really works, and he kind of like puts the axe to the grindstone on the defensive end. That would be what really makes me impressed with him, because he was like, it's tough to be a good defender on a bad team, like defensively, but Emmanuel was really bad last year for the Raptors. He had a reputation when he came over from New York that didn't hold up, and that was disappointing. So hopefully that happens. That's what I'm looking for. From Carl Ribeiro, at Big Batista 23, quote, tell me all of the things that have to happen for the Raptors to make the playoffs in 2025, end quote. Okay, this is a good question. They have to have a top 20 defense. Scottie Barnes has to be selected to All NBA. RJ Barrett has to get closer to a neutral on defense, and so does Emmanuel Quickley. Gradey Dick has to score 14 points per game and shoot 40% from three. Ochai Agbaji has to make more than 1 3 a game on above 36% from three. Davion Mitchell has to play more than 17 minutes per game. Jakob Poeltl has to stay healthy. If all those things happen, I think they're a playoff team. And some of those things are contingent on being a playoff team. Like, Scottie's not going to get an All NBA nod if he's not in the playoffs. That's kind of how it's going. And I guess like some of this all hinges on other teams being good or bad. But it's hard to speculate about all that stuff at once. I mean, there's 15 teams in the East. Like, we'll see. From Love at HWorld17, thoughts on the WNBA season. Okay, so I've watched more WNBA this year than I ever have before. The Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese game, the Fever versus the Sky just wrapped up. And obviously that was not as close as many of their games have been. That was for the Clark camp, that was a big win, I think, that game. And she was really fantastic. And Angel Reese didn't have her best, but you kind of drop into a WNBA season where I know they talk about rookies really having a tough time adjusting. And I thought Caitlin Clark really did at the start. The physicality really, it made her change her approach to a lot of these games. But the fact that both Angel and Caitlin come in and set records, like Angel as a rebounder, Caitlin as like a wholesale offensive engine, it's pretty nuts. But I know you're an Aces fan, so AJ Wilson just having like all-time player, having an all-time season, incredible. And, it is really interesting. I've always loved just like popping into a WNBA game and seeing that like ball movement is more important, I've made this point before, but I've always loved the idea like that there's a ball reversal from the rim to the 3-point line more often in the WNBA than in the NBA. I think it's a really cool aspect of the game is like the ball gets under the rim, and in the NBA, especially with the propensity there's so many guys who can just go up and dunk that. Finishes around the basket in the WNBA, just by proxy of this style of play, are a little bit more contested. And there's so many good shooters in the WNBA that a lot of time that ball will go back out if people collapse to contend against that layup. And the amount of shooting that we've seen, and especially like the Fever have been going nuts lately. I don't know if that'll hold up or anything, but it's been pretty nuts. But you see, just because of the shorter games, different offensive environment, like volume shooting is more important than ever in the WNBA. Maybe not than ever, but it's just way more important in the WNBA than it is in the NBA. And you see like some of the highest scoring players, like not all of them are these like efficiency gods like you see in the NBA, but like Arike for the Dallas Wings, just like getting shots up all the time, just going after it. Like, there's different archetypes in the WNBA who have kind of been like filtered out of the NBA because of where the NBA has gone and how the game has changed, that still exist in the WNBA. So I enjoy it for the diversity of play, and especially like that juxtaposition to things like a bygone era in the NBA. And for anybody who longing for certain things that have kind of left the NBA, like a certain style of basketball, you can actually go watch the WNBA, and it's a pretty good amalgamation of things that have left the NBA. And that's cool because there's a lot of different ways to like skin a cat. There's a lot of different ways to win basketball games. And especially when, the environment informs how you play. And so do the skill sets. And so that's what I really like about this WNBA season. I think I will be somebody who ramps up accordingly. I still don't watch that much because I watch too much basketball all the time, and my off season is my off season. But yeah, it's been fun. I'm looking forward to like how it wraps up. From Gusito, Goose, my guy, my sweet bird brained man, quote, send what you want to see from the Raps defense this upcoming season. Yeah, I'm in a bit of a tizzy because I wonder if it's more important for them to play a style of defense that will be less successful by the numbers, but more successful in what it instills in the players they hope will be around for the next era of the Raptors, or if they should just be trying to have as much success defensively as possible and just like do all of the new things, like work on court coverage. Don't even worry about sticking in front of your man. Just switch things liberally, try and cover the court, make up for things everywhere. Like that kind of stuff has been a good knuckleball against a lot of, offenses in the NBA that you can steal some games. And because the quirks and rhythms of offensive players, especially role players, they see a lot of the same thing. They're making predetermined decisions. If you change up the rhythm of how that happens, if you start throwing different rotations, more like bombastic rotations at them, and like you're peeling away, you rotate a lot more. You're just trying to be like a whirling dervish on that end. It can really complicate what teams want to do. Nick Nurse had a lot of success with this. OKC has had a lot of success with this, but I think it gets figured out, and it's more important to develop a more conservative defensive identity. So as far as like what I want to see, I would like to see schemes that ask Scottie, IQ, and guys like Gradey, who like RJ, whatever, like guys who you expect to be around, have them defend the way you think you're going to build the team for the future and what roles you see them on. If RJ Barrett is on a good team, who is he defending? What does that look like? If Scottie Barnes is on a good team, who is he defending? What does that look like? If Emmanuel Quickley is on a good team, who's he defending? What does that look like? I want to see them defending for the future, even if it costs wins in the now, I think. So that's the stuff I want to see defensively. And you can pick and choose different defensive roles that you think can cover up for what RJ, slower foot speed, a lack of, fluidity and mobility. It's like, okay, you know, James Harden was really good at guarding post ups. That was a nice thing. You could hide him on the weak side because he was aggressive as a dig guy. It's like maybe RJ Barrett, you say like you're gonna be a guy who's hidden a lot. So here's what it's going to look like. We're going to scram you out of a bunch of situations. We're going to have you rotate out of a lot of the stuff at the point of attack, but be really aggressive off ball. Be a playmaker there. Try and give us a plus. Try and develop these decision-making cues defensively now. Maybe you could do something like that. If Emmanuel Quickley, if you believe he can be a point of attack stopper, put him through the ringer. Let's have the reps. Let's see how it goes. Scottie Barnes, I think, has found his role. I think he's an all defense level player, and it became very clear that he was once he transitioned to the sweeper role, that back line, blow everything up role. But I guess we'll see. But I want to see intentionality about the defense. Rather, like the Nick Nurse process was like, we're going to scrape and claw to the best defensive rating we can possibly muster, even if we don't have, even if we're not learning that much important stuff down the road. But yeah, I guess we'll see. From Cameron Shetler, quote, here's a semi-joking one and a serious one. After DeMar's comments about the impossibility of beating LeBron made the rounds and drew a variety of criticism and mockery, do these people, A, not know ball, B, didn't actually watch the East, C, something else entirely, and then 2, Bonus question. Katie Heindel is one of the best writers out there, and based on no data, I feel she's wildly underrated and underappreciated. Who are some NBA writers slash content creators you'd like to highlight that make you think and feel things in a unique way? Yeah, that's a really good one. I'll start with Katie. Katie, I think she's teaching, like she teaches some of her writing, or she's like part of sports media. She, and also outside of sports media, just writing in general, she has a lot of bylines, and I think she gets to do her creative writing, and also like basketball feelings has emerged into like this big thing. I don't know if I've read other people who write like Katie. She is able to make things vivid that seem mundane. It's a very special skill, um, but also to the point that she's like doing some teaching and informing young writers. Um, you know, like maybe some people will write more like her in the future that are coming up. Who are some NBA writers slash content creators you like to highlight that make you think and feel things in a unique way? So this is something I'm guilty of and talk about all the time. I don't really take in much basketball content. It's just not something I really do. I I do my analysis, I do my thing, but I don't read much basketball stuff. As far as like highlighting people, I will do my best to have good guests and everything coming up. And so this is put on hold. Who I choose to highlight on the podcast and guests I bring on this year can be part of the answer, I think. Fingers crossed. And then DeMar's comments, DeMar was just like it was so tough because DeMar struggled, like it's just the right message, wrong person sometimes, it seems like, because like I agree with DeMar. I like when guys are honest. When J. Cole was like, hey, actually, I'm not built for this. I don't want to be in this with Drake and Kendrick. I was like, I get that. I respect that a lot. And obviously, it would go on to become a very wise decision in the eyes of many. DeMar has like, an astounding sense of self-awareness when he talks about all this kind of stuff and of his own limitations. Like he knew what he was up against. Everyone does, but he's the guy who put words to it and said like, yeah, this seems like impossible. Nobody beat LeBron in the East for years and years and years. They won more games than the Raptors did, though. But, and they had more success technically, but nobody beat him. And the reason why it's tough coming from DeMar, DeMar is my favorite player of all time. I'm not too hard on him, although he objectively had really tough times in the playoffs. I think it's just people being hung up on, and especially Raptors fans being hung up on like, DeMar, you don't get to talk like this because you didn't play well, and maybe if you had played well, X, Y, Z, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just like people want to hear certain things from certain people. They want to hear other things from other people. It is what it is. From Mike Chumbley, quote, over under on Dick averaging 15.5 points per game, end quote. I'm going to take the under. Now, I think when he went on his run, which was an awesome run, and he shot the hell out of the basketball, the piss out of it. I think he scored like 11 points. I'm not sure how he gets to 15, especially like one more three a game, sure, but 15, I'll take the under, and we'll let the season play out for. I know maybe a longer answer would serve this well, but as it currently sits, I think that he won't be the recipient of as many transition, looks as like RJ or Emmanuel. I think that he will be an important spacer on offense, but also there are other guys who are just going to get the ball more than him. Guys that defenses will load up on and the ball will find him, but to the tune of like 15 points per game, he's a great cutter. He's had really nice runs as a shooter, although has to be more consistent overall. We'll see. But I would take the under. Now, as far as like into the future, I'm expecting several seasons where Gradey is above 15.5 points per game. And he's really good at finding buckets for himself in the open play, whether it's in transition, whether it's like through cutting, finishing at the rim with both hands, English, different variations of finishes, or just torrid 3-point shooting. He does a pretty damn good job. However, he has to keep himself on the floor on the defensive end. He has to stay healthy. he has to shoot more consistently, and he has to merit getting that many looks a game. And I don't think all of that will manifest in season 2. From Jack D. Ander, quote, "Are you going to do more pods with Caitlin?" End quote. Yes. I waiting on some things to develop, because like this is a job. Things have to develop in a certain way. Things have to be assessed, all that kind of stuff. But my hope is, and Caitlin's hope is, and we're just kind of sitting on our hands here, is that there will be a lot of work between the two of us. I love working with Caitlin. I learn a lot from her. I am honored that she feels like she learns from me, because as we all know, Caitlin is regarded, I think, as the best basketball analyst among a lot of basketball analysts. And so it's I appreciate very much that she even wants to work with me. So yeah, more from myself and Caitlin, of course. From Spence Bell, quote, "Walter, Shed, and Mobo. Given our current roster needs, yes, there are plenty, which rookie makes the most sense to get the most minutes this season?" End quote. Roster needs don't matter at all when you're not supposed to be a very good team. And whether it's the coaching staff or the front office, whoever, anybody from those two camps has been saying like rebuild patience nonstop. It's a very common theme. Although I love that Emmanuel and Scottie like push back on that. That's a healthy dynamic, I think, is like the front office and the coaching staff preaches patience, and the players say like, "Hey, fuck that, man. We're trying to win." That's a healthy mix. Maybe the players can overcome that, but there are a lot of needs, but they don't have that much talent on the roster that they can kind of like look for need. I think they just want to, like, they have a lot of guys they're looking at between the 905 and guys who will be like back end of the rotation / bench guys. Guys need looks. You are just waiting for somebody to pop. I do really like Mobo. We need to see him healthy, and we need to see him playing probably, if he wants to have any success, the 4. He might have room as a 3 if certain skill development comes along. We'll see. But I think, and Jamal Shed, I think, is mostly a 905 guy this year. We'll see. But Jacoby Walter, I mean, that's the guy. He might pop. He might be like a really high level shot maker. You can see the seeds of hopefully what will be giant, a skill tree, let's say. That's kind of what we're hoping for from Jacoby Walter. I think he is the guy you want to get the most minutes from, because there is a world where Jacoby and Gradey form like an unbelievably strong 2-guard tandem. And Jacoby probably offering a little bit more shot creation and point of attack defense, and Gradey maybe being a better off ball defender and being just like a total heat pump from 3 who warps the floor. Those guys can coexist. One probably coming off the bench, but as we see with Sacramento, like having Malik come off the bench with Kevin Huerter, hopefully both, Walter and Gradey translate to the playoffs better than Huerter did. But there's room for dynamism at the 2-guard position, and I would expect Walter to be the guy who gets the most minutes, and he's the guy who would want to see get the most minutes. Oh, and the finish from Athan's question from before, a win prediction. God, I don't know, 32 wins between I don't know 25 and 32. Is Kelly Olynyk done as a top 4 big rotation player? Looked terrible in Paris and offered no defensive resistance last year. Has too many turnovers for a fringe rotation player. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Like, his defense was terrible with the Raptors, terrible. But the Raptors were a terrible defensive team. He's not putting out fires by himself. He's supposed to, like, if he's in a healthy defensive context, I thought maybe he could hang. And by hang, I don't mean like a positive, but like maybe a small negative. And then he played with Canada, and he's the type of player on the smaller floor, it should be more friendly to him. That's how quite a few FIBA bigs who are slower footed, carry a bit more weight because the FIBA game is different. They can contend in these spaces because they have to cover less ground. Kelly looked bad, like really bad. I was so surprised at how bad he looked, and he wasn't very good in 2023. Like when they made their run towards the bronze at the World Cup, he wasn't good. Shea was unbelievable. Dylan was unbelievable. Even Nikhil had a pretty good tournament just as a gunner. But Kelly wasn't good then, and he was even worse in Paris. I've talked about this before, but I was shocked by the front court, how terrible they were in Paris. It was like a little bit heartbreaking, honest to God. It did make me wonder, like, is he done as a top 4 big rotation player? I think so. Like on most NBA teams. However, he signed an extension. He'll be getting paid good money for, I think, his like really good money relative to his impact. Really bad for the Raptors, perhaps. But he will be a hub on offense. He will be like a voice in the room. He's being paid for all that, for intangible stuff and some tangible offensive stuff that helps the Raptors move through so many different things. And I expect the Raptors hope and expect to see him as, a voice that helps other players with their improvement and progression and all that kind of stuff. But we'll see. Hard to calculate for intangibles, but teams always invest in them, right? And then, do the Raptors win the chip in 2019 without breakout and somewhat unexpected performances from Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam, despite the all-time great playoff run by Kawhi? And what happened to Norm during those playoffs to make him largely a non-factor? What stat line do you expect from GTJ with Bucks versus Bruce Brown Jr.? Yeah, they definitely don't win. Fred shooting like 78% from 3 on insane volume from what was it, game 4 of the Bucks through the end of the finals. Not something you can plan for or expect. It was insanity, but they definitely don't win. They're definitely not winning without that. And Pascal Siakam was like, his defense at that point in time was unreal. The extra shot creation he was able to provide on broken plays was unreal. The transition ad was unreal. They, like, Kyle and Pascal, they broke down the Warriors over and over and over again with that 1-4 pick and roll. And Pascal made great reads driving out of the short roll. He didn't shoot the 3-ball well in the finals, but like, he scored the hell out of the basketball throughout. Like, there's a reason he's in the tandem with Kawhi. Kawhi obviously did the heavy lifting, but no, they don't win without those breakout performances, because that Golden State team was very good. Even without KD, it's just very good. They swept the Blazers, right, without KD. So, yeah, they definitely don't win. What happened to Norm during those playoffs to make him largely a non-factor? Basically, Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo, and also Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, like, the 76ers were huge. Orlando Magic were huge. The Bucks were huge. And Norm kept getting run off in the short amount of time that he did play. He kept getting run off the line, and he hadn't really developed a lot of the counters as a passer or as like a push shot maker in the middle. He couldn't get all the way to the rim. It was so crowded. That's why Fred was so terrible. I couldn't believe how bad Fred was against the 76ers. But he got funneled into the middle, and you have guys like Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, everyone massive, wonderful defenders crowding you. There's just no space for air. And Norm suffered from the same thing, and he didn't have the hot shooting stretch that Fred did, so Fred took those minutes and ran with them. And, God bless. That's how it was. Stat lines for Gary versus Bruce Brown. I don't know what Bruce's role is going to be with the Raptors really this year. It's tough to tell. Like, this is a guy who's openly pitching himself, to other teams. Kevin Kiermaier did that as well. And Kevin Kiermaier didn't stay on the Blue Jays, right? But Bruce pitched himself to other teams, and he stayed on the Raptors. So, it's just kind of funny, man. Gary, I think like 10 or 11 points per game, probably shoots north of 40% from 3. Hopefully he's put in with Brook and Giannis behind him, his gambling on defense will be better for their scheme than it was with the Raptors. So, I don't know about stat lines, but God bless them both. I'm hoping for good things. From Isfandiar Barahani, if you had to be stranded on an island with one current Raptor, who would it be? Also, what are you most excited to talk about this season? Also, will you conquer B6? I will answer that last one first. Of course I will conquer B6. It's just a matter of time. I looked it up. There was a study on it. It takes most people 2.5 years of climbing to get to V5. I reached it in like 3.5 months. And so I'm well on my way to V6. Like I'm getting after it. Just today we climbed together. You saw me climb some nice climbs. It's something I'm working on. Within the next calendar year, I'm going to climb a V6, like 100% certain. You can take that to the bank. What am I most excited to talk about this season? Probably Scottie Barnes. Before he got injured and when the Raptors were like more interesting and before the team blew up, he's very fun to talk about, and he succeeds in really unique ways that you get to dive into and you get to explain and learn, perhaps in the other way, learn and the other order, learn and explain unique and intriguing concepts about how success is found in the NBA, because Scottie does achieve things in a unique fashion. And by proxy of him being the best player on the team, so will the Raptors. So I think that is what I'm most excited to talk about. Just how Scottie as the number one player manifests in how the Raptors attempt to find success or even just go searching for it. If I had to be stranded on an island with one current Raptor, who would it be? Oh God. Uh Honestly, Bruce Brown. I feel like, yeah, we both wear cowboy hats on occasion. We both rock the cut off sleeves. We're both little fashionista boys. That yeah, sure, Bruce Brown. From Shadow Monarch Big Blue, quote, would you rather be a shooter who's insanely accurate, like 99% from the free throw line and high 80s from three, but below 20% inside, and like 1% from the free throw line and 20s from three in the clutch, or the opposite where you suck the rest of the game but are accurate in the clutch? You're a bad defender in both cases. Okay, so basically the situation is like you can be an unbelievable jump shooter and terrible everywhere else and a bad defender, but just unbelievable for a large percentage of the game, or you can just be unbelievable in the clutch as a jump shooter. I think the whole game, right? Because like if you're that good a 3-point shooter, 80%, and you're even remotely good at getting your shot off, the more minutes you play, the more shots you'll get, and 80% on threes is unbelievable. So I'm gonna go for that. From Amina Poco, quote, being objective here, am I the only one noticing the lag in people accepting Shea being better than Luka? It reminds me of people not realizing that Curry had actually passed CP3 well before 2015. Both mercurial offensive talents, although I think Shea's easier to fit next to others, which offsets the passing gap. And then there's the defense and how the difference there impacts the ceiling of the team you can build around them. As Canadians, let's also not be afraid to be biased. Yeah, I was very early on the Shea MVP candidate train. During the 2020 season, I was like already there. Did some really interesting podcasting with PD Webb back in the day about that. We had a lot of really and on the Bouncing Around podcast, talk very high thoughts on Shea early. And I do agree with you that I would rather have Shea than Luka. And it is because Luka can carry so many things so far, but it is a team game, and Luka has not yet papered over some of the things about his game that would make team building around him much easier. He's continued to ratchet up things that are, lean into what he's good at. He's gotten unfathomably good at scoring the basketball, unfathomably good at playmaking, but there is diminishing returns, I think. And Shea, the things he's able to do, especially defensively, the gap there is quite large. He's not an all defense level defender or anything like that, but he's a positive, like a real positive in the playoffs and during the regular season. That's unbelievable. I think he's an underrated playmaker as well. Shea, I think, is better than Luka. Shea hasn't yet gotten the backlash of a player who's considered one of the best in the world, but Shea, for the next like however many years, I think should be firmly in the conversation of this guy could be the best player in the world. It's tough to get past Jokic, of course. Very tough. Maybe tough to get past Wemby at some point. There's always a player who comes out of the woodworks and is like in contention. But Shea, I take Shea over Luka. Yes, agreed there. And maybe, perhaps, biased being Canadian, of course. Catherine Ann Bird, quote, Abby from The Last of Us and King Joffrey both need saving, but you can only save one. If you had to choose, who? And would you trade the 2019 title for 10 prime years of Shea as a Raptor? So, no, I don't trade that title. It's special, you know? I I I wouldn't trade that. As far as like Abby from The Last of Us and King Joffrey, I save Abby, but also I didn't finish The Last of Us 2 because I understand what they were trying to say is like there's always a different perspective, other people experience things different than you do. Big shout to Joe Mazzulla, who was like, there was that funny interview moment where he's like, we're all a villain in somebody's eyes, and he has like he always does stuff like that. He's an odd fella. I've had odd interactions with Joe as well, but he's right. Our actions are perceived differently depending on the point of view from which they were seen. That's what they're trying to and the cycle of violence is what they're trying to portray in The Last of Us. However, I didn't finish the game, and I thought that message falls flat because you're not watching it. This isn't a show where they're acting independently and you're watching these people do this, right? You're controlling the characters. It's not them enacting the violence. It is, but it's you enacting the violence. And you have no choice to end the violence. The game continues on. It forces you to kill people and dogs and all this kind of stuff, right? Like that's the game. You can't like learn the lesson it's teaching and say, I won't be doing it. I'm stopping the cycle of violence. No, the game says, hey, this cycle of violence is really bad. Kill that guy. And you probably should be thinking about kill that guy and make sure that you burn these people. Like it falls a little flat, which meant that I wasn't like, Abby, it's from a different. I was like, damn, I liked playing as Joel. I liked playing as Ellie. So I didn't finish it, but I also thought like what it was trying to convey. It falls a little flat when you're telling that story through video games because it's forcing you to go against what it's trying to portray as like the message of it. It's a little bit of like have your cake and eat it too. Anyway, video game talk. Yeah. Okay, from Jonathan Phillips, quote, a little forward looking, but what's the archetype of the guy we should be drafting in 2025? And what current guys in the league would make an ideal fifth starter? I think players like MPJ or Trey Murphy would be the missing link for this current roster. I mean, brother. You want to talk about a Trey Murphy fan right here. For years, I love Trey Murphy's game. Like, adore it. Michael Porter Jr., when Trey and I talked on the podcast, we were like, well, you might go dumpster diving. I think as far as like looking at who earns $36 million a year, 38 or whatever it's jumping up to, like Michael Porter Jr. does shockingly little. And he's very efficient in what he does do, and he is a really good player, but he does shockingly little for a guy in the like max contract earning space. And I wondered with like he's too important to the Nuggets, but we're like, oh, maybe that's a guy who becomes available. I do like MPJ's game a lot. I think he could be, the missing link for many rosters. Probably it's just you have to pay him an absurd amount of money. Like he could be your fifth best player, and that would be awesome. He could be your seventh best player, and that would be awesome. He can be your third best player, and that's awesome. But he can't be your second or first. But he is paid close to that. Maybe he can't even be like your third with a bullet. But anyway, I don't think the Raptors should care about finding a fifth starter. The team just isn't good enough. Like I've talked about this before, but I'm not super like BBQ. I like. Looking forward to covering them. They will get a chance to, you know, build themselves into something to prove that they're, better than perceived, that maybe they could be the core of a championship team, but I'm not high on that idea. And so looking for a fifth starter, no. The Raptors need to be looking for a second starter and a first starter and a third starter. Like everyone who isn't named Scottie, truthfully, can ease at this point in time, they'll have chances to develop into, better players. But like any of those guys could be replaced on like a really good team. Like Emmanuel Quickley, I'm really excited to see what he becomes, but like he probably would have had trouble in this past playoffs. Like he probably would have had trouble. He probably wouldn't have performed well. He's had a tough time in the playoffs in the past, and he wasn't like a starter with a bullet. He's and RJ hasn't been that either. These guys have not proven anything yet. And they'll get the chance to, and they should get the chance to. But the Raptors should be looking at a wide array of potential outcomes, and they should be looking at like if they have a chance to pivot into something better, you can always do that. So the fifth starter, they aim higher. They need to be trying to get in second, third, fourth guys. Like, and if you get second, third, fourth, and it bumps Emmanuel Quickley into the third guy from the second guy, or the third guy to the fourth guy, or whatever, like that's just better for Emmanuel. That's just better for RJ. So the fifth starter, God, I don't know. That's looking too low. Can aim higher, I think. Oh, and who should we be drafting in 2025? Cooper Flag. Okay. From PJL Precious, since it's the Raptors' 30th anniversary, please kindly name your top 10 Raptors of all time in no particular order. Okay. This is a good question. This is not something I think a lot of people would have this very quickly. I do not think about this. So let me put my mind to work here. DeMar is in there. Kawhi is in there. Pascal is in there. Vince is in there. Kyle is in there. And these aren't in order for anybody who wants to freak out. Who else should be in there? Chris Bosh is probably in there. That's 6. Jose Calderon, I would put in there. Fred VanVleet is in there. I won't put Scottie in yet, but Scottie like objectively is going to be like if he plays out his contract, he'll be probably top 3 or top 5 at the very least. Stoudemire might make some people's lists, but he wasn't there that long. Same with McGrady. Let's put Serge in there. I think Serge be the 9th guy I pick. Serge has an awesome career with the Raptors, I think. And what the hell? Jonas Valanciunas. I think that's 10. If I'm forgetting somebody, really obvious, my apologies. But yeah, let's have that be my 10 guys. From Dindas, if you could pair Scottie with any under 25, not named Ant or Wemby, who would you pick? This is really easy. Luka. Now I know I said I like Shea more than I like Luka, but I don't like any under 25 that isn't Ant or Wemby more than I like Luka. And like if there are guys who could pair really well with Luka, especially since Scottie's on that rookie max extension, which is it's very easy to see that it'd be pretty easy to build a really good team around the two of them. Like imagine if imagine Scottie Barnes is there instead of Derrick Jones Jr. Like it's easy to see that. But as far as like the fun answers that aren't Luka, like Tyrese Maxey and Jalen Williams are two really fun guys. I know, like if you had a really really strong guard, Evan Mobley would be a really fun pairing with Scottie. I don't know about Cade is disappointed in the NBA so far, but they played really fun basketball as high school teammates together. But yeah, I think like Luka is number one, obviously, but like guys like Tyrese, Jalen Williams, those are really fun guys, interesting guys. And I saved the oddest question for last from Mr. Killionaire47. And like, hey, you know what? It's the off season. We're supposed to get weird. Quote, would you rather be a bisexual necromancer or a bilingual necrophiliac? It's the bisexual. Easily, man. The necromancer I have seen in many movies is you raise somebody from the dead, as far as I understand it. That happens all the time. That's like a classic fantasy thing. The other one, which I'm not even sure if I should have read out loud, but that one, you know what? That's just nobody wants any part of that. You know what? Like, what the hell? You give the homies a kiss on the lips to meet the bisexual standards, whatever. That feels like a wrap on the podcast. I think I've answered. Oh, Andrew Livingston said, what is the best ice cream in Toronto? I've not been frequenting a lot of the ice cream in Toronto. I don't actually know, but the CNE is still going on for a little while. Maybe I'll try something before I go. But yeah, I think that's all the questions that have been asked of me. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a podcast asked. It'll be all time stamped. There's no point telling you now. I suppose I should have said this at the front. It's time stamped, so I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, or actually, I'll put it at the front. That's what I'll do. If you're listening to this now, you heard me say something at the front, and I did. The magic of editing helped me do it. But yeah, like and subscribe on your way out. Thank you for listening. I'm excited for a big season coming up, and a few changes to the day-to-day stuff. And okay, so God bless. I've been Samson Folk. You've been listening or watching. Thank you for tuning in. And I hope you dug the light. I felt like, this, I bought this lamp because it reminds me of like a glow globe from Dune. And it was from the was it IKEA like 70s collection. But I like how it floats over my shoulder. Wait. Like, like the moons in Star Wars. I know I just made the Dune reference, but this kind of looks like it could be, from Star Wars, right? But anyway, anyway. Okay, everybody, all the good stuff, yeah, thank you for listening. Okay, bye bye, I'll see ya.